meetings too. So I think that's one of the reasons the provost has sponsored this Reaffirming Brown Values series.
Oh, yeah.
And he and I had, we started out having informal conversations about...
You're presenting.
Yeah,
right?
Monday. We started out having informal conversations about, like, the Janet Mock thing where, there was student groups that clashed and she sort of decided not to come. And also there was another speaker at Hillel who got kind of shouted over, and then, although I don't think that event got shut down, I think it was just disrupted. And then, of course, the specter of Ray Kelly. And so he and I started talking just like, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with navigating different commitments in a pluralistic community? And how do you do it constructively? So, and then that turned into more formal conversations with other faculty as well. And that kind of produced the series, because one of the things we realized is that people don't know how to have difficult conversations. They don't know what's at stake. They don't know how to do it. They're worried about it. So that's another example of how kind of a faculty need or concern sort of engaged with the administration to try and produce something helpful.
Yeah.
Because I think there are a lot of well-meaning folks. They're just clueless.
There were two things that you said that really also struck chords with my previous conversations. One was, in this first group of people that you mentioned, there's this appeal to this excellence, as if there's some sort of trade-off. Excellence, many would say, is subjective. Of
course.
But yet there always seems to be some constitutive items or elements that pop up into what people think of when they're like excellence.
Yeah.
In your experience either in the department or campus-wide, what kind of things are those?
I'd say in the best case scenario, it's, for a research university, it's peer review. Okay. So the idea that a person's work has been vetted by external disinterested parties at reputable presses or good journals. So blind peer review, university presses. So if a person presents with that kind of a CV for a research institution, that counts for excellence, right? And I think that's pretty much the core of it, at least in my discipline, in the humanities discipline. Yeah. So this becomes an issue when you're dealing with... And of course, that's not an objective standard in itself, right? Because whether or not you get published depends on who your advisor was and what kind of training you had and what we work on. So the reason that's problematic, even though it sounds objective, is that it's not. And it sounds neutral, but it's not. And the problem with the excellence standard is that it's pretending to be neutral, but it's not. So it's not so much that we don't know what it means, it's that we pretend it means something it doesn't. So... What
would you say that pretend thing is?
We pretend it's publication, right? But it's more like that old definition of porn. I don't know what it means, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
And... Or maybe it's definition of art.
I think it's for art, but it was used in porn in a Supreme Court thing.
Fair enough. So, I think that's where the rub is. It's this kind of pretending to objectivity, this claim of objectivity, when in fact you're being extremely subjective. And what's very hard then is forcing faculty to come to terms with the fact that the very system that has put them in the position of privilege that they now enjoy is not a meritocracy, which means that you didn't get it because you're inherently better than anybody else. And maybe the standards should change. And I think that that's existentially very threatening to a lot of faculty to think, maybe you didn't deserve to be here any more than anybody else, but you're here, right? And we're not saying you don't deserve to be here, but just acknowledge the contingency of your existence here. And people don't want to acknowledge contingency. They want to say, we have standards. We know the standards. Everyone knows they're universal. But it's because there's no such thing as universal. And not only is there no such thing as universal, that ignores all the structural impediments that people face, educationally, institutionally. So it's not an accident that most people who teach here went to a certain kind of college or got their PhD at a certain kind of place. Or that when we do a job search, because we know we've been in these institutions, like half this department, did a PhD at a particular Ivy League. Not this one, but there are it's ridiculous how many connections there are between my particular department and one other Ivy League school. The reason their work is intelligible to us is because they were trained in a way similar to us. It's not just that we know who their advisors are. That counts too. But it's even deeper than that. It's that the very way we receive knowledge and perceive of excellence has been conditioned and we forget that it's been conditioned. So that's really, really hard when you have the kind of excellence debate. So I think, getting people to talk in terms of, is the pipeline empty, or is your pipeline like a straw that's really narrow? Like, maybe if you redefined it differently, you would find it populated by different kinds of people. And the reason you're not defining it differently is because you were trained in a very particular and contingent way to think of this as what excellence in the field means. So those kinds of conversations are much more constructive and helpful, but they're hard.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is they take a lot of time, right? So, you can talk about, diversifying fields starting at the college level, if not the high school level, to get people into college, get the humanities to be front and center, or the social sciences, and not just professional, kind of pre-professional fields. And then getting people to stay in grad school and not go to work right away, and then getting them to stay in the academy, and then getting them to want to be professors. Like, that's a lot. And it just takes a huge amount of mentorship and care and attention over a very long period of time. And I think the other thing that's tricky about these issues is that there isn't one solution. Like, we have to do professional development. We have to do faculty mentoring. We have to do undergraduate mentoring and cultivation. We have to do graduate mentoring and education. There are so many, balls in the air all at once that it's going to take to actually diversify the academy. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. And you face that argument about excellence at every level. At every level of that process. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah. It's one of those other things that just somehow always pops up.
I mean, Yeah, people will often now, they don't say it in a mean way, they basically say it in an exasperated way. Like, well, we had a couple of candidates of color, but they just they didn't reach the level, they weren't above the bar, like, and that might, according to your standards, that might be true, but so where are your standards coming from? Like, what does it say about you? It can't be an accident that no person of color has ever met the bar. Really? Like, come on. Like, either you're saying all people of color are just subpar, or the way you're measuring this is off. Yeah. Right? Or self-reproducing or something. So it's just flipping that light on for people so that they can see. They just don't think about it.
Interesting. You've also now brought up twice these ideas of meritocracy being built into it.
Yeah.
What do you see as, when people think of something as being meritocratic, what kinds of things are they talking about? What is worthy of merit, I guess, another way of saying it?
So what do you mean? There's two different questions. Like what do they mean by meritocratic, and what kinds of things do they think are worthy of merit?
So yeah, and sorry, both intentionally separate questions, but okay. I guess one can what qualifies as merit when you're talking about faculty of color who either leave or don't get hired or don't meet the bar consistently. Yeah. What is this objective?
Every field is different, right? So I think once you're in a department, at least at an institution like this one, the currency is peer review. Okay. The currency is peer review. The problem is, it's like they measure it just from the end product without figuring out why some things are likely to be published in some venues versus others, right? So they won't value, for example, in the humanities, they don't value co-authored journal articles as much as single-authored ones. Yeah. But some people's work, if you're an engaged scholar who works, say, with the community, will be more collaborative than other people's work. So suddenly the thing you're doing and doing well is simply being slotted into a system where that thing is automatically valued less. So someone who sits alone in an office and works on an ancient text, like me, and produces an article or two, will be valued more than, say, someone who's out in the field, who works like with the Swearer Center and deals with public education in Providence, even though they might be putting in twice as much work as I am. Because collaborative stuff and engaged stuff is not considered as valuable, because we're working on this like 19th century model of what a university is and how knowledge is produced. So there are other ways of thinking about it, like, so it could be, for example, that I published with a really good university press, but someone else's work is actually much more appropriate for a state university press that is less well known, right? And people will look at it and say, Cambridge, Oxford versus, like, pick your state university press that's not known for being as prestigious. But it could